The N64, probably best remembered for annoying everyone by picking Oddjob on GoldenEye, taking sneaky shortcuts on Mario Kart, or spending hours fishing on Lake Hylia on Zelda. But if you wanted to kick a digital football, you were stepping into a wild, untamed 64-bit frontier. This was the era where the FIFA vs ISS rivalry went full 3D, while bizarre Japanese exclusives and celebrity endorsements all fought for pitch space. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to rank all 10 football games released for the Nintendo 64. Now, a couple of quick ground rules before we kick off. First up, I'm only including traditional football games, so no management sims or strategy games here. Second, to stop things getting bogged down, I'm combining regional variants into single entries, unless a localised version had completely different gameplay. And just like my other videos, I'm judging these games on the 3 pillars that make or break a football game. The features and modes, the sound and visuals, and most importantly the gameplay. How does it actually feel to play today? Are we dealing with fluid, timeless arcade action, or absolute frame rate tanks? Well, that's enough of that. Let's dive in. These are the top 10 football games on the N64. Kicking off our list at number 10 is J-League 11 Beat 1997. Released exclusively in Japan in October 97, this was developed and published by Hudson Soft, the very same studio most famous for the Bomberman series. As you'd expect, the menus are entirely in Japanese. However, if you can read Japanese or navigate them with the aid of a translation app, you'll actually find a pretty decent spread of modes. You've got your standard friendlies, a full J-League mode, an original league, tournaments, penalties, an all-star match, and a training option. It is strictly J-League teams only, of course, but you can transfer players between clubs, and it even looks like there might be an option to create your own club, though I didn't make it very far through that particular menu. Visually, the game goes for an extreme, cartoony, blocky design. The player models look like a bizarre cross between Nintendo Mii's and the NPCs from Final Fantasy VII. It's all very basic. The stadiums sort of resemble the real-life venues you select, but the crowds are literally just a bunch of bouncing round faces. There's no commentary, but it does feature a fun, childlike announcer who excitedly calls out, The over-the-top sound effects suit the cartoony vibe they were going for, and while the music is catchy at first, I found it got pretty repetitive. On the pitch is where things really fall apart. It does run at a super smooth 60 frames per second, but that's about the only positive. Bizarrely, and this is a frustrating mechanic we will see pop up again later in this video, you can't see which player you are currently controlling. It makes defending an absolute nightmare. Worse still is the default camera. It pans dynamically in a way that makes it genuinely horrific to play. It is quite possibly the worst camera in football game history. And as far as I can tell from clicking through the menus, there is no way to change it. The gameplay is incredibly slow, and moving the ball around feels tedious. I couldn't figure out a way to sprint, and the goalkeeper's a superhuman, making scoring a chore. It's simply not fun to play. Overall, it's a really poor game. If I'm being generous, it has a couple of endearing, quirky snippets, but that blocky cartoon design isn't going to suit most people. Most importantly, it's a massive slog to play. I can only describe it as being akin to a Wii Sports minigame, but with official licensing and absolutely no fun. It looks like it was aimed at children, but honestly, forcing a kid to play this could put them off football games forever.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Limping into the number 9 spot is FIFA 64. Despite what probably did confuse a number of parents in 97, the 64 of course did not refer to the year. Although I genuinely think if it was 1964 teams and squads, it would have been an infinitely more interesting game. Anyway, where was I? Developed by EA Canada and released in Europe in 97, this was EA's big debut on the N64. If you lived in Japan, you got a localised version called J-League Live 64, which swapped out the international teams for the Japanese club teams. For a series that usually prides itself on presentation, the package here is surprisingly bare bones. You've got a very basic menu offering friendlies, tournaments, leagues and a playoff mode, alongside standard options to tweak the half length and difficulty. While there is a solid selection of international teams, the club selection is remarkably limited for a FIFA title, featuring only teams from the USA, Italy, England, France and Germany. On the plus side, it does feature real player names, but it's bizarrely missing a lot of features that were standard in FIFA 97, which came out before it on other systems, like player transfers or the ability to choose your stadium. There's not even a training mode. The audio presentation actually starts off well. You get the comforting tones of Des Lynam introducing things, with John Motson and Andy Gray in the commentary box. Having them on board was a massive deal at the time, even if their lines do get quite repetitive, probably due to cartridge limitations. However, visually things take a massive nosedive. It just looks awful. The ball is a blurry blob that barely looks round half the time, and the player models are extremely poor. The animations are incredibly choppy. It honestly looks like they are moving about 5 frames a second. The pitch is just a flat green sheet, the crowd is a pixelated mess, and there's only one basic stadium used for every single match. They didn't even include an on-screen score graphic. If you want to know what the score is, you have to pause the game. They did include a choice of camera angles, which was still a nice novelty back then, and there is a bizarre picture-in-picture camera option. You can swap out the radar for a secondary match camera running simultaneously. I have no idea why you would ever want to use it, as it's incredibly distracting and tanks the frame rate even further, but it's an interesting idea nonetheless. On the pitch, I'll be frank, it's borderline unplayable. The gameplay is painfully sluggish and unresponsive. The physics are abysmal. The ball just moves around on its own, bending in the air like you're playing Tiger Woods and applying mid-air spin to the ball. The input lag is so bad you basically have to press the pass button about 10 seconds before you actually want the player to kick it. To make matters worse, your players come to a dead stop whenever they try to shoot, which almost guarantees you'll get tackled. The controls are fiddly and confusing, with the same button seemingly doing different things at random, and the whole experience is dragged down by terrible performance and constant slowdown. Honestly, this feels like a zero effort release from EA. When you consider that Konami's International Superstar Soccer 64 came out just a few months after this, and absolutely blew everyone away, more on that later, FIFA 64 is a complete shambles. It's easily one of the weakest entries in the entire franchise. The fact that it has the official licenses and is in English is probably the only thing keeping it off the bottom spot in this list. Moving on to number 8, we have J-League Dynamite Soccer 64. This Japan exclusive was developed by AMAX, a studio that made a handful of J-League games for the SNES and PS1, and published by Imagineer in September 1997. As you might expect, the menus are entirely in Japanese. Once you translate your way through, you'll find a fairly standard array of modes. Friendlies, a league mode, tournaments, an all-star match, penalties and a player transfer option. Match settings are basic, letting you tweak the difficulty and half lengths. It is strictly J-League teams only, and while you do get to choose from a selection of real-life Japanese stadiums, as we'll see in a moment, that choice doesn't really matter a great deal. Visually, the game is a major letdown for this generation of hardware. Remember those real-life stadiums you can select? Well, in-game they look incredibly generic, and the crowd is quite literally a vertical wall of bouncing pixels. The player models are blocky and the animations feel odd and unnatural. However, it's not all doom and gloom. I actually really liked that they included real player photos next to the names on the screen during play. As basic as the graphics are, the official kits look surprisingly decent, complete with numbers on the backs of the shirts. Interestingly, the default camera angle is a vertical up and down view, something that was becoming very rare to see by 97, but thankfully you can switch it to a more standard TV style view. On the pitch, things get frustrating very quickly. You have the exact same problem as 11-beat we just looked at. There is no player indicator when you don't have the ball, which makes defending an absolute nightmare. The players turn like tanks. The whole experience feels rigid, lacks any sort of rhythm, and trying to control the ball to build up a move is a massive struggle. To make things trickier, the moment you hold down sprint you immediately lose control of the ball. The controls just aren't intuitive at all. If you do miraculously manage to put a passing move together, you'll find the goalkeepers are amazing, making getting the ball in the net a whole new challenge. Overall, it's a really poor game. Oddly enough, for reasons I can't fully explain, I actually did have a couple of very brief moments of fun playing it, but I can't imagine I'll ever pick it up again. Its only real redeeming feature is the J-League license, but since there are far better games on the system that offer J-League action, there's no real reason to consider this one. It looks poor, the controls are incredibly clunky, and the on-pitch action is far too limited to rank any higher. And number 7 is Michael Owen's World League Soccer 2000.
Get in there! Well done, he's 13.
Developed by Silicon Dreams, who you may know from making some of the Sega Worldwide Soccer and UEFA games across Dreamcast and PlayStation. This entry was published by THQ in November 2000. This game had some interesting localization. In Germany it was known as RTL World League Soccer 2000, and in North America it was released as Mia Hamm Soccer 64, which completely overhauled the male players into female models. You get an impressive selection of over 200 clubs and international teams, plus a solid spread of friendlies, leagues, cups and the ability to set up custom tournaments. For a game with his name in the title, there's not a whole lot of Michael Owen action here. Apparently he did do some motion capture for the project, but otherwise they didn't really utilise his licence in any meaningful way. At least the Mia Hamm version had a picture of her on the menu screen. Visually, the players all have those Max Payne style photo faces that were all the rage back then. It's a very no-frills presentation with fake kits, but there are a few nice touches. The stadiums look decent, the layered crowd effect works surprisingly well, and you can even see water pooling on the pitch in the rain, which is impressive. The commentary is alright, though it does have a weird habit of dramatically announcing that the half is nearly over when you're only 25 minutes into the match.
First half almost over.
In this version, the players were motion captured, whereas the North American Mia Hamm version was entirely hand-drawn, although I couldn't really notice a drastic difference. On the pitch, it's basically a lift and shift from Silicon Dream's other games of the era, like World League Soccer 98 and their UEFA Champions League titles. The ball physics actually feel quite realistic for the time, but the controls are a bit overcomplicated. Stringing more than one pass together isn't straightforward at all. Just like those J-League games we just covered, as far as I can tell there is no option to manually switch the player you're controlling when defending. The opposition AI is really poor and the frame rate seems to tank whenever the ball isn't in play, which I found got frustrating fast. Having plenty of modes and teams is great, but the mediocre gameplay drags the whole package down. It's not terrible, but it's just not very fun. All the hardcore Michael Owen fans out there who rushed out to buy this.
There are dozens of us. Dozens!
Might be left wondering where he actually is. The game doesn't have a great deal going for it, though I will say the North American Mia Hamm version does deserve some credit for featuring women's football, which was extremely rare at the time. If you want a better version of this game, check out my video on the Dreamcast football games. Silicon Dreams had much more joy on that hardware. Sliding into number 6 is World Cup 98, released by EA in May 1998 to capitalise on the tournament hype. This was the only fully licensed World Cup game in the West. This marks the second EA entry on our list, and amazingly it was the third football game they released on the N64 in just 14 months. Because it's tournament focused, the modes are streamlined. You get friendlies, training, penalties and the World Cup itself. If you manage to win the World Cup, you unlock Cup Classics mode, letting you play through 8 historic World Cup finals, which is a smart feature that gives the game some longevity past the summer of 98. It is strictly international teams, featuring all 32 nations that qualified, plus an extra 8 that didn't. You have the choice to swap those non-qualifiers into the groups to rewrite history. The tactical options are surprisingly deep, letting you adjust directional runs and the aggression of your AI teammates. And much like EA's previous release, Road to World Cup 98, you can fully edit the national squads to your liking. The presentation here is fantastic. Des Lynam introduces the games and John Motson is on commentary, and players even line up for short national anthems before kick-off, which really adds to the World Cup feel.
So to the national anthem.
Visually, it builds on the engine of its predecessor, but adds real-time shadows. You get all 10 real-life France 98 stadiums, which look great and have authentic tournament billboards inside, and most teams sport official kits, which was still amazing to see in 98. The players still have those distinct, slightly ape-like FIFA proportions, but the improved animations, varied goal celebrations, and on-screen stats make for a brilliant TV-like experience. If you were traumatised by the mess of FIFA 64 back at number 9, don't worry. This is an absolute world away from that disaster. The gameplay leans heavily into a slower simulation style compared to the ISS titles, focusing on replicating a real match day. With full analog control, the setup gives you genuine freedom on the pitch. While it plays very similarly to Road to World Cup 98, it feels slightly faster, and the AI has definitely been improved. It isn't quite as slick as Konami's efforts, but the physics are good and building up a play feels rewarding. Also, the penalty shootouts feature some hilariously over-the-top cutscenes of players going absolutely nuts between kicks. They are definitely worth checking out. If you want an authentic tournament simulation, this delivers. The lack of standard club modes cuts the replayability short compared to a typical FIFA game, but the presentation is top notch. Although, spoiler alert, if you are hungry for France 98 action, this isn't your only option on the system. More on that coming up. Breaking into the top 5, we have FIFA 99. Released in December 1998 and developed once again by EA Canada, this was EA's final football offering on the Nintendo 64. And what a way to sign off. By this point you know the drill. It's FIFA, which means you get the absolute works when it comes to licensing. Nearly every real team and player name is here, with the notable exception of R9, who was locked into an exclusive deal with Infogrames. More on that in a future video. If we are splitting hairs, it technically had fewer teams than the previous year's FIFA, but you still get a staggering 292 squads to choose from. I found the menus a bit ugly this time and sluggish to navigate, but underneath them lies an absolute mountain of content. You've got friendlies, training, a league mode, and the European Dream League, which was essentially EA's take on a European Super League. There's also a golden goal mode, where you can set a target number of goals to win a match. It's a bit of a gimmick against the AI, but I feel like this would have been great when playing against mates and you wanted something a bit different. Player transfers also return, allowing you to manually update squads and keep the game alive for years. You can even edit players, teams, kits and choose from 20 real-life club stadiums. Though in a move that broke hearts worldwide, EA tragically removed the legendary indoor mode. On the mic, John Motson handles commentary solo this time. Maybe he knew something was off about Andy Gray even back then. The crowd noises are once again solid and add a great realistic atmosphere during matches. Visually, FIFA 99 is another step up from Road to World Cup 98. It introduces basic facial animations and even different player heights on the pitch. The TV style presentation is top tier once again, complete with fantastic little touches like players arguing with referees, limping when injured, or consoling each other after a loss. The real life stadiums continue to look great, even if EA took creative liberties with some. The San Siro, one of the most iconic stadiums ever, looks nothing like it here for some reason. There are no real kits, which is a bit of a step backward from World Cup 98, but they more than made up for it with the soundtrack. The menu music, featuring Fatboy Slim's Rockefeller Skank, would help anyone get through a sluggish menu layout. What a tune. Where FIFA 99 really differentiates itself from its predecessors is the pace. One of the biggest complaints about earlier 3D FIFA games was that they could feel a bit slow. To combat this and to clearly target Konami's dominance, the gameplay here feels faster and plays more like a hybrid of simulation and arcade, and it's much better for it. The controls are more responsive, allowing for pinpoint passing, snappy shooting and smooth dribbling. The AI of both your teammates and the opposition has been upgraded, making matches feel more realistic. They also expanded the skill moves, letting you chest the ball to control it, pull off 360 spins, and yes, you can even dive. It's incredibly hard to successfully fool the referee, but it's pretty fun to try. Ultimately, EA knew exactly what they were doing by this point. They delivered a shiny, realistic, TV-like experience, absolutely packed with features and modes. Sure, the core gameplay might not have been the absolute finest on the system, but it was still a lot of fun to play, and as an overall package, very few games of the era could compete. It's a brilliant send-off for the series on the N64. Just missing out on the top 3, we have International Superstar Soccer 64. Developed and published by Konami, this came out in Europe in June 97. If you were in Japan, this was released as GQ J-League Perfect Striker, featuring domestic club teams, which Konami later updated into GQ World Soccer 3. Featuring the same international lineup as the Western release. Compared to the mountain of teams EA was offering at the time, the selection here is on the lean side, featuring just 36 international teams and no official player licenses. You can expect entirely fictional squads, although England does have some interesting players like R. Banks, J. Moore and T. Keegan. The menus are fairly basic, but you get a solid suite of modes: friendlies, penalties, international cup, world league and training. Thankfully, the awesome scenario mode from the 16-bit days makes a return. In keeping with the game's arcade vibe, you get some refreshing match options. You can tweak player morale to affect their on-pitch ability, toggle specific rules like fouls and offsides, choose your referee, and even change the number of players on each team to adjust the difficulty even further. One feature I absolutely loved was the ability to create your own custom player and drop him right into any squad. I always welcomed a chance to do this. Visually, the player models are nicely detailed and the animations are highly realistic and incredibly varied for 97. The 5 fictional stadiums and the pitch look fantastic, genuinely adding to the matchday experience, though the crowd doesn't look too good up close. A handful of teams even sport remarkably accurate kits, which is always a win. The audio, however, is a bit of a mixed bag. You get a brilliant, jazzy, almost carnival-esque soundtrack, but the commentary is quite basic in this one and suffers from inconsistent volume levels between lines. The crowd noise also has a bizarre habit of cutting out entirely for minutes at a time.
Is he going to switch it across? He's going to make the run. Midfielder. He's hit it first time. He couldn't keep it down. The two teams are in deadlock,
making the matches feel strangely eerie. On the pitch is where ISS 64 truly shines, and it firmly sets the benchmark for the other Konami games coming later in this list. It's a direct 64-bit evolution of the arcade-style gameplay found in ISS Deluxe. Instead of getting bogged down in the slower simulation approach of the FIFA series, the gameplay here is incredibly fast-paced, high-scoring and frantic. It actively discourages slow, patient build-up play in favour of thrilling end-to-end direct action. The responsiveness and ball physics feel absolutely perfect. It was also one of the earliest football games to fully embrace analog control, allowing for pinpoint precision when executing through balls and rapid 1-2s. It is incredibly accessible for a quick pick-up-and-play session, yet deep enough for hardcore veterans. You can map in-game strategies like offside traps and set marking and activate them mid-game through button mapping. Combine that with brilliant AI and an incredible penalty system and you have a very addictive, very fun football game. If I have to be critical, the only things working against this one are the lack of official licenses, which us Konami fans learn to deal with, the relatively small selection of teams and the occasional janky match audio. But frankly, this game is superb. Konami took everything that made their 16-bit games legendary and perfectly updated it into full 64-bit 3D glory. Even today, this is an absolute joy to play. Taking the bronze medal at number 3 is FIFA Road to World Cup 98, developed by EA Canada and released in December 1997. This juggernaut landed on basically every platform imaginable at the time. I got the PS1 version for Christmas that year and played the hell out of it back in the day, so it was fascinating to finally dive into the N64 version for this video. When it comes to content, this game is an absolute monster. You get an astonishing 189 club teams and all 172 FIFA registered national teams that took part in the real-life 1998 World Cup qualifiers. To put that in perspective, EA didn't attempt to selection this massive again until the 2010 World Cup game. Naturally, it is all fully licensed. The standout is the titular Road to World Cup mode, letting you play through the gruelling continental qualifiers all the way to the tournament itself. Since this came out before the real-life tournament squads were confirmed, they smartly included the option to edit the national lineups yourself. You also get 11 domestic leagues, including the Malaysian League for some reason, friendlies, training and a penalty shootout mode. The club transfer system is back, and this time with a brilliant economy mechanic, where players have monetary values and clubs have budgets, adding a sim-like depth that most other games lacked. But the real crown jewel for me? The legendary indoor mode. This fast-paced 5-a-side option was pure chaotic fun, offering a totally different feel from the main game and adding a brilliant layer to an already stacked package. The presentation is classic EA TV style polish. We get the iconic trio of Des Lynam, John Motson and Andy Gray back on commentary, a huge deal at the time, even if the audio package was slightly stripped back compared to the CD based versions. Visually, it is a staggering upgrade from the blurry, choppy mess of FIFA 64 we looked at down at number 9. The players actually resemble human beings now, and you get 16 real-life stadiums that look genuinely impressive. The scaling can feel a little off depending on the camera you use, sometimes making the ball look a bit massive, but overall the matchday experience is fantastic. complete with time of day options and various weather conditions. The kind of stuff we take for granted now, but was incredible to see back then. Also, a quick shout out to the indoor mode having real-time reflections on the wooden floor. It looked absolutely mind-blowing for the era. Gameplay wise, since we've already covered FIFA 99 further down this list, you know roughly what to expect here. But compared to FIFA 64, which came out just months before this one, it is a night and day difference. It's smooth, responsive, and most importantly, actually fun to play. It leans heavily into that slower simulation style compared to the frantic pace of the ISS games, focusing on replicating a real televised match. With full analog control, the varied moves and controls at your disposal give you the full freedom to build up plays realistically, and putting the ball in the back of the net feels genuinely rewarding. Is this the best version of this game? No. But it's not far off at all. And while the match engine isn't quite as rapid as what EA would later achieve with FIFA 99, and it couldn't quite topple Konami's on-pitch arcade experience, this is arguably the very best example of what FIFA brought to the table. It is what always kept them in the conversation during this growing FIFA versus Konami rivalry. You get literally hundreds of teams, an unrivaled authentic matchday experience, and enough varied options to ensure you almost never run out of things to do. But let's be honest, it probably earns its spot in the top 3 off the back of Blur's Song 2, even if they do cut it short in this one, and that glorious indoor mode alone. Taking the silver medal at number 2 is International Superstar Soccer 2000. Developed and published by Konami, this released late in the N64's lifespan in October 2000, which sadly means it flew a bit under the radar for many. In Japan it was released as GQ J-League 1999 Perfect Striker 2, featuring domestic clubs, and it even had team-specific chants, a brilliant feature that unfortunately didn't make the journey west. It returns with all the staple modes and options we came to expect at this point. Friendlies, World League, International Cup, penalties, scenario mode and training all feature. In addition, you get a Euro Cup to tie in with the real-life Euro 2000 tournament, complete with regional qualifying. The international team selection has been massively expanded to an impressive 100 teams, including every single UEFA affiliated nation and some much smaller rest of the world nations like Papua New Guinea. In Europe, the player names are all sound-alikes again, and I don't know if Konami were feeling the heat from Fifth Pro because the names were not quite as obvious this time. Michael Owen is Goffen and Paul Scholes is Acoles. The American version interestingly did manage to secure partial licensing for some real names, although no single team had a 100% accurate squad. But the biggest addition in the European release is the career mode. It's an innovative RPG-light precursor to the later Become a Legend modes. You have 3 in-game years to take a custom player from the reserves to the national team by balancing training, resting, socialising and even dating. It's incredibly rewarding, though it does break immersion slightly by making you control the whole team during matches. I did find it incredibly text heavy. I've played full on JRPGs with less chat than this. But having this mode is really interesting for the era. I didn't have time to get too deep into it, but I'm guessing it gets a lot more fun later on. Visually, it is essentially a refined version of the already fantastic looking ISS 98 and 64, complete with brilliant player models, smooth animations and top-notch stadiums and lighting. This was also the first and only game in the series to support the N64 expansion pack for a higher resolution mode. I wasn't able to capture that here, but I'm told it looks nice but hits the frame rate. You'll also notice tiny pockets of fully 3D fans standing at the front of the crowd, which looks a bit odd against the remaining 99% of 2D blurry crowd, but hey, at least they tried. On commentary we have Chris James and Terry Butcher, and the crowd audio has been upgraded significantly, featuring recognisable chants and brilliant little touches like the fans sarcastically cheering when a goal kick is taken. Since we covered the Konami engine back at number 4 with ISS 64, you know exactly what to expect. The core gameplay remains largely untouched, which is absolutely for the better. It's still slick, fast-paced, direct, arcade-style football that favours end-to-end momentum over slow build-up play. The controls still feel completely natural and the physics are absolutely perfect. The only real difference I noticed on the pitch is that it feels to me just a touch slower than ISS 98. Make no mistake though, it is still incredibly rewarding and an absolute joy to play to this day. If it ain't broken, don't try and fix it. ISS 2000 takes the masterpiece that was ISS 98 and carefully builds upon it, with a massively expanded team choice and the ambitious, if not quite perfect, addition of the career mode. This could have easily taken the number 1 spot on the list. However, I do have to pick one game, and I'm splitting hairs here, but ISS 2000 is held back just slightly by a few minor bugs I noticed, alongside that marginally slower pace on the pitch. It is an incredible, feature-rich swan song for Konami on the N64, but there is one game that just manages to edge it out for the gold medal. Taking the highly coveted number 1 spot,
International Superstar Soccer 98.
Developed and published by Konami, this was released in Europe in September 1998. A quick point of clarification is needed. While it shares the same box art as ISS Pro 98 on the PlayStation, it is a vastly different beast. This is the direct follow-on to ISS 64, and as we'll go into more detail shortly, this was also released in Japan as GQ World Soccer World Cup France 98. The team selection has been bumped up from 36 in ISS 64 to a healthier 54 nations. You get the same brilliant suite of modes returning from the previous instalment: friendlies, World Cup, World League, penalties, training, and a fresh batch of scenarios to work through. While there are still no official player names, the squads this time are strictly based on the real-life 1998 lineups. Instead of completely making up players, you get glorious sound-alikes. England, for example, boasts the formidable trio of Gascoigne, Inch and Ferdinand. It might sound silly now, but having those recognisable likenesses genuinely bumped up the immersion over the previous entry. Plus, you can manually edit the player names and create up to 60 custom players if you want to set things right. You also get a wider choice of stadiums, including a nice tie-in with 3 real-life venues that were used in World Cup 98, including the Stade de France Stadium, which hosted the World Cup final. The visuals received a really nice bump here compared to ISS 64. Player animations are smoother, and seeing substitutes actually warming up on the touchline is a brilliant touch. Also, what I always liked was that most teams wear highly accurate kits, arguably doing a better job with some of these than FIFA did in World Cup 98, despite EA holding the official licence. The audio is a massive leap forward too. The legendary Tony Gubba takes over commentary, and while he only refers to players by their shirt numbers, it feels incredibly natural. Throw in dynamic weather, distinct time of day options, a solid crowd atmosphere, and a fantastically funky rock soundtrack, and the presentation in this is top tier. Since we already covered the ISS gameplay when talking about 64 and 2000 earlier, I won't repeat myself too much. Needless to say, it uses that exact same fast-paced, fluid arcade engine as ISS 64, but it just feels perfected here. It is relentlessly fun. It also retains that superb penalty system where you use the analog stick to aim a target square, trying to outsmart the goalkeeper's cursor at the very last second. I also have to talk about the Japanese release, GQ World Soccer World Cup France 98. For that version, they actually secured the full official World Cup licence, but exclusively for the Japanese market. As a result, it features real player names and Japanese commentary that enthusiastically shouts them out. You also get a full official World Cup mode to play. If you can navigate the menus, which isn't too difficult these days, it perfectly solves the only real complaint people ever had against the ISS games. You get that legendary gameplay combined with the license goodness usually reserved for EA. It's absolute perfection. Yes, you could easily argue ISS 2000 could or should be at number 1, and honestly, there really isn't much in it. But for me, ISS 2000 just feels a fraction slower on the pitch. ISS 98 gets the gold medal because it perfectly balances that blistering arcade speed with deep rewarding mechanics, alongside a suite of options and modes that is certainly nothing to be ashamed of. And I might be slightly cheating here, but when you combine all that with the fact that the Japanese version gives you the licensed World Cup 2, you've got yourselves a stone cold classic, and the best football game on the N64. Well, there you go. What did you think? What was your favourite? Did you play any of these? Let me know in the comments. If you like this, feel free to click the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you've not already. Catch you on the next one.